Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. And be sure to add our podcast, The Next Best Bet, in the How Did You Hear About Podgo section of the application. Now, on to episode 73 of The Next Best Bet. I'm Jake Higgins with Brett Levy as always, and we have a chock-full episode, but Brett, football is back.
It is. We got our first games of the college football season on Thursday night. South Alabama and Southern Miss. We got training camp heating up, players signing. It's football season, Higgins.
And we'll get to those games a little bit later in the episode. We also got some MLB and then playoff hockey and basketball. Let's check in on how we did in episode 72, though, Brett. I did win my pick of the pod. I told you I had a feeling that OKC was going to take it into a Game 7 against the Houston Rockets. That game's going on right now on Wednesday night, about to head into halftime. That was my only winner, though, from that episode. But quick side note, I did post some social media pics on Wednesday before we recorded this morning, actually. And funny story, I posted the Mets-Orioles over 10.5 because both of the starting pitchers just had really high ERAs. I thought it was going to be a slugfest. And the over did hit. Problem is, I did not end up taking that. I realized after that game was going on and I was stressing, I accidentally took the Cardinals-Reds over. And that did not hit.
Well, we always tell our listeners to make sure you know what you're betting. Higgins, make sure you know what you're betting.
We've been over this a few times for me on the need to double check my bets. So gonna have to go back to the fundamentals, go back to the basics of making sure I double check my bets before I press that place bet button. But Brett, you did 1-3 as well.
Yeah, we both won 1-3, but I beat you, so that feels like a double win.
Yes, I had the Yankees in that Rays-Yankees game that you ended up winning, and of course Garrett Cole kept his trend of giving up home runs, so what else is new there? Let's get into some Beginners Boulevard, though. We're going to talk about some chalk, baby.
Yeah, taking chalk, just betting on the favorite. So, sometimes that pays out, sometimes it doesn't, but if you ever hear someone say the term taking chalk, that just means they're taking the favorite.
And we have a few examples of that throughout the episode today, so we'll make sure to bring that up as we go through our picks. But yeah, just taking the favorite. Like tonight, the Rockets were -5.5 over the Thunder, so if you were on the Rockets, you took the chalk. But let's get into our NBA because we have some more games on Thursday, Brett, and it's been a really weird past few days in the NBA playoffs. The Celtics play in the Raptors. It's going to be Game 3 of the Eastern Conference semifinals, and Boston has a 2-0 lead. Do you think they can make it 3-0?
Well, Boston's looked really good. Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker, Jaylen Brown have been tough for the Toronto Raptors to deal with, but I'm actually going to take Toronto on the money line. I think this series is going to be tough throughout. I thought it was going to go 6 games in the beginning just because they're two very good teams, well-coached teams. So why change? I thought it was going to go 6. I think it'll go 6 again. So Toronto's going to have to win one eventually to get it to 6. So let's start in Game 3. I'm going to be on Toronto on the money line at -110.
And we've seen this spread stay within a basket basically the entire series. That trend continues right now with Toronto being favored by a point. And at the money line, -110 each way, Vegas is calling this a toss-up. So I'll be very intrigued to see how that game goes. I am more intrigued about the Game 1 Western Conference semifinals that's happening later on Thursday night, though, between the Denver Nuggets and the Los Angeles Clippers, because we've already seen some Game 1 series upsets in these NBA playoffs, and while I think Denver is capable of that, I'm not going to throw the chips on the money line. I'm going to take Denver at +8.5 because I think that's a very big margin, and I wouldn't be surprised if Malone has his players come out with a bit of a chip on their shoulder, a little bit edgy, and they might be able to maybe steal game one, but I'm not going to bet on that. I'm going to bet on it being a close game and being within 9 points.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those games where the rust versus rest factor, right? So are the Clippers going to come out rusty or are they going to come out well rested? Playing a team that who their series went the full 7 games. The Clippers had a tough series against Dallas, but with a few days off in between, so we'll see. I think this will benefit the Clippers. Kawhi likes to take some rest days during the regular season, so having 4 days in a row without a game, he's probably not going to be too upset, Higgins.
I would say the 8.5. The part about the 8.5 that worries me is the final score of that game seven between Utah and Denver. It was an 80-78 just brawl of a game. And if the Clippers come out and they run the floor like they know they can and their offense is clicking, it's going to take a lot more than 80 points by Denver to beat that spread.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. 8.5's a big spread. I don't know if it's going to be a blowout, but I had to stay away. I wasn't ready to bet on this series yet.
I am very anxious for also the NHL that's going to be going on, and maybe that's why I'm not going to be on the Boston Toronto game because my eyes are probably going to be a lot more focused on this Philadelphia Flyers versus New York Islanders game. If you listen to us, you know that I am a Flyers fan. It's a 3-2 series in favor of the Islanders right now, so the Flyers need this win. I'm a little too nervous to put my money on either side of this. The over was tempting me though. If I'm leaning anywhere, it's leaning over at plus 100.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the Flyers were able to come in and force a game 6. Can they keep it going and force a game 7? I know a lot of Islander fans were up here in New York where I live that uh, were hoping they could close it out in 5, and they weren't able to get it done. I think the Flyers are a little bit deeper than the Islanders, so maybe as this series keeps going deeper, it'll turn into the Flyers' favor.
The game I am going to be on in the NHL though is the Vegas Golden Knights versus the Canucks, and I think the Golden Knights are going to seal up this series here, and they're not going to make it go to a game 7. Vegas holds a 3-2 lead in the series, and I think Vegas would have been able to shore up that series in 5 if it wasn't for just the stupendous goalkeeping by Demko. He had 43 shots against, saved 42 of them. It was a 2-1 victory for Vancouver, who only had like 13 shots. They had less than 20 shots on the night. So Vegas, they were able to put up the pressure. It was just a hot goaltender that stopped them, and Vegas, every win they've had in this series has been multi-goals. So minus 1.5 at plus 108. I'm going to take those positive odds.
Yeah, I have not been able to catch too much of this series. The West Coast series have been a little tough for me here with these 10:30 start times and all the
Little
NBA
too late.
playoffs going on and the MLB and something's got to give, Higgins. So, unfortunately that's been some of these West Coast series, but uh talking about the other West Coast series, the Stars and the Avs, those overs have been hitting like crazy. So it kind of makes me think this over 6 in this series could hit. Am I way off on that, or does that seem like it's in play?
It's been kind of back and forth in this game so far, or in this series so far. So Golden Knight had a shutout in game 1, winning 5-0. Wouldn't have hit there. In game 2, it would have hit when the Canucks won 5-2. Game 3 wouldn't have hit, and Knights had another shutout 3-0. Would have hit in game 4 when the Knights won 5-3, but in game 5, 2-1. So it keeps alternating back and forth. So I guess by that logic, since it's every other one is an over hit, then yes, this over 6 would hit on that trend in game 6.
Okay, but it hasn't been like the Avs and the Stars, where every game's just flying over that 6.
No, not at all. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. That's why the over 6 is minus 110 either way. It'll be interesting. But yeah, minus 1.5. Taking the puck line always puts you on edge, but who knows? An empty net goal can always help put you over on that. So plus 108 is some pretty good odds. Let's jump into Moneyline Magic. And as I hinted earlier, Brett, we have had quite an interesting past few days in the NBA playoffs. I mean, we were going to talk about the Utah Denver game up until the Milwaukee Miami game finished shortly before we started recording. And that was just a bizarre ending.
Yeah, I mean, everyone got involved, and the refs got their TV time in, so that was good. But I'll definitely say this: the controversial ending, probably not as controversial as people want to make it out. I think, definitely on the Giannis Jimmy Butler play, I think that was a foul. I don't know what Giannis was doing. I mean, he ran into Jimmy Butler. What are you doing? Don't run into
Well,
the jump shooter.
Well, I think especially if you call that foul by Goran Dragic on Middleton a foul, which it's questionable. I kind of agree with Doris Burke that I wouldn't have called that, but uh, the ref that they had on the call, or on the yeah, the ref they had on the call with the announcers, he said it's a close one, but he thinks it was a very good, correct call by the refs on the floor. Middleton made all three free throw shots, though, to tie it up at 114 when really Milwaukee hadn't led for much of this game at all. And then Miami gets the ball to Butler in the corner, and Butler only had 10 points all game. So my thought is almost you let him take that shot in a sense, and Giannis has the ability and the length to be able to go over there and put some pressure on him, but especially that left hand on the side of Butler after he released the ball definitely seals that as a foul. If it wasn't for that left hand, I think it's a little bit more of a toss up on whether that gets called. But if you call the Goran Dragic call, I think you have to call the Antetokounmpo one.
Yes, Steve Javi was the guy on
Thank you.
ESPN, but it's just you gotta play smarter. I mean, let's go back honestly to the Denver Utah game. Torrey Craig makes a bonehead play, takes that layup. Like there just been some plays that have really shocked me at the end of these games, and Giannis literally running into a jump shooter. Uh, just doesn't really make sense. Like, sure, I agree. I'd love the refs to swallow their whistle and let the people determine it on the court, but he ran into the jump shooter. I don't know what else you want me to say. Like, just don't do that, please.
And before we started recording, you mentioned that he may have even taken away Butler's landing space, which we saw earlier in the game. Iguodala's landing space was taken away, and he rolled his ankle landing on Corver's foot, which is exactly why that is there. So having that already happen earlier in the game also maybe influences the later call a little bit. I think it is the correct call. I think the refs did do a good job down the stretch overall in that game. And Miami taking a 2-0 lead in that series, especially with Butler not playing well in that second game until down the stretch, really. I think that's very impressive, and I think that's going to definitely affect the line for game three.
Yeah, no, all good points, and we'll see what happens. Miami actually had a pretty good record in the regular season against Milwaukee, so it's definitely been a little surprising to see Milwaukee come out down 2-0, but anything can happen in game 3. I'm on Toronto tomorrow night or Thursday night, and they're down 2-0 as well.
Let's jump into the MLB now, though. Before we get to our picks, Brett, because we have a couple interesting ones, I'm going to give out a lean that I was very close to pulling the trigger on, but as I've been over a few times on this, I just mentally have a very hard time taking over-unders if I'm going to take the under. And in baseball, it terrifies me, especially in a hitter's ballpark like Houston. They have two strong pitchers on the mound of Lance Lynn versus Zach Greinke, who are having very strong years. Their ERAs are both sub 2.5. I think Lance Lynn's under 2 in his own right. But Houston's a hitter's ballpark, and Houston's lineup has that ability to put up 4 or 5 runs and make this a 8-run game where it finishes 5-3 or something like that. So Under 7.5 at plus 100, I think is fantastic value. I can't bring myself to take it though.
You know what I want in baseball, Higgins? I just want the Rays and the Yankees to play every day. That's all I want because that series has brought fireworks, suspensions. It's brought great quotes out from managers. What did Kevin Cash say? I got a bullpen full of guys throwing 98. That's the baseball I want. I want that. But not to take away anything from Lance Lynn or Greinke, just different kinds of fireworks. I like the loud emotion. Those two guys get it done with their pitching, and they've been keeping a lot of batters at bay this season.
They really have. Now, Brett, you and I are on the same game, but before we talk about the White Sox versus the Royals, I want you to give out your other pick.
Okay, Taiwan Walker is making his Blue Jays debut on Thursday against the Boston Red Sox. The Boston Red Sox have not been good this year, in case anyone needed a news flash. Actually, the dude that leads them in home runs is now on the Padres. So, I just think it's a spot where I'm fading Boston. The Blue Jays' new arm is coming in, getting the start, and they're only minus 120 on the money line, so that's not too much juice for me. So I will play Toronto minus 120 in Fenway Park.
Okay. Boston plus 105 at home is a little interesting, but they've been having a down year, and Blue Jays with that young batting core of Biggio, Guerrero, Bo Bichette, they've just got a young group of guys that's just going to make that Toronto group get better with the years that are coming. But Chicago White Sox versus the Kansas City Royals. Now, Brett, you and I have a pillar of not picking the same line, but we're breaking that pillar, so we're going to see and test it out, see how it goes. Chicago White Sox money line minus 130.
Yeah, I saw you had it down first, but I usually do a nice thing. You usually do a nice thing where we stay off it for one another, so that person has a better chance to win. That line was too enticing for me, Higgins. I couldn't stay off of it.
I
The
agree,
White
I agree.
Sox, the White Sox lineup is just too much, and Danny Duffy isn't really going to, I don't know, scare me away from picking the White Sox in this one.
Especially since the last time that these two teams played was rather recently, obviously, I mean, because there's limited scheduling in this shortened MLB season, but the White Sox took two of those three games, and it was a 5-2 win and a 6-5 win, and then Kansas City in the one that they took was a 9-6 win, so Kansas City's bats were still going. Kansas City has Dylan Cease on the mound, who has a good year going at a 3.00 ERA. I think he's going to keep it going. I think the White Sox are definitely the right pick here. And at minus 130, I still like that value.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And then Higgins, I just want to mention something really quick. But this weekend, Madison Bumgarner making the start in San Francisco for the Diamondbacks. That might be a spot where I actually play Arizona. I think there's going to be a little emotional boost there. So look out for us on social media on that one.
And while you're bringing up probable pitchers, we did not have a line for this game on Thursday yet, but Mike Clevenger is supposedly making his debut with San Diego on Thursday against the Angels. And the Padres have been playing very well, and the Angels, not so much. He's facing off against Andrew Haney, so I think Clevenger might have himself a win in his first start. I'd say I'd be leaning on that Padres. It'll be interesting to see what that line is, though. I mean, Will Myers' undisclosed injury was put on the 10-day IL. It'll be interesting to see how they reshuffle, but they did get a few first basemen in Mitch Moreland and Aaron Nola to fill up that corner.
Yeah, and I mean, the Padres are probably the winners at the deadline, so
Big
I
winners.
yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't be too afraid. And in terms of Will Myers, I think we know why he is on the IL, so we will have to keep our eyes on that as well.
Yes. We told you we were gonna talk about some college football, though. So, Brett, let's get to it. And there is some news before the games here of that you wanted to talk about that we talked about in our group chat of a few of our friends, and you got a little bit mad at us because we wouldn't take it seriously about Newman opting out of the season at
Ah,
Georgia.
I didn't get mad. Anytime you're the number one transfer on the market and you're the starting quarterback for a top three football team, yeah, I think that's big news. I do think it's noteworthy. Georgia, top three in the country this year, loses their starting quarterback, who's a dual threat. Their second string quarterback, another transfer coming off ACL surgery. So he's probably not going to be your starting quarterback this year. So you turn to a true freshman, a guy that was supposed to be third on your depth chart. Probably going to affect Georgia a little bit this year. And Georgia bettors, be aware of what is going on in that quarterback room.
That is a very good point in terms of the backup also dealing with his ACL recovery. I didn't even think of that. So, going a little further down on the depth chart than you would imagine, it'll be interesting to see how this SEC season shapes up. That's not what is going on this weekend, though. It is going to be some of the mid majors. We saw Central Arkansas already had one of their games, and Brett, they're playing on Thursdays. Does the 1-0 start to their season entice you at all when they're plus 19.5 against UAB?
No. I gotta be honest. I will not be watching UAB Central Arkansas.
I'll be honest, I won't be watching that either because there's some playoff hockey and some playoff basketball going on. I'm not going to be on either of the Thursday games. However, Saturday's games do interest me a little bit. Middle Tennessee versus Army, SMU versus Texas State, Arkansas State versus Memphis. We got lines for all of those. I like the Middle Tennessee versus Army game, and I was originally leaning Army minus 3.5 at the spread, but then I took a look at these offenses, and both of these offenses look very potent. I mean, Middle Tennessee, they have a redshirt junior quarterback. They have two ACC running backs transferred to them, a deep wide receiver core. They're top 50 estimated in terms of their offense. Army, who we all know runs the Veer, has two senior running backs, a junior quarterback, and an entire offensive line of upperclassmen. So that smells like two successful offenses. I'm going to take the over at 55.5 at minus 105. I want to see some football. I want to see some scoring. Middle Tennessee and Army, please give it to me.
Yeah, no, that should be a good game. Both teams, pretty good for what they are. SMU Texas State's also on Saturday. Arkansas State versus Memphis. Now, if you're gonna bet Memphis, you have to be aware Kenneth Gainwell opted out of the season, and he's probably the best running back outside of the Power Five in college football. So that's a big loss for Memphis. 19.5 point favorites against Arkansas State. I'm probably going to stay away from it. I lean that way, but new coach, no running back. Maybe Arkansas State's the play here, Higgins.
Now, our listeners may be wondering why we're not talking about the biggest game of this week, which is BYU Navy. Well, that game's on Monday, and we have another podcast that comes out on Monday. So we're going to talk about that game in the next episode, but we have these different games here. I like the Middle Tennessee versus Army game. SMU Texas State at minus 22.5 intrigues me, but that's a lot to give up, more than 3 touchdowns. If it falls under 21, maybe I'll take it, but I don't see that happening. And then Memphis minus 19.5, that intrigued me until you told me about their best player not being available. So might just be a round of watching some mid majors and seeing where some value is early this weekend.
Yeah, I'm not gonna bet on any of the college football this weekend. I have no idea what it's gonna be like. For instance, there's probably gonna be fans in the stands for South Alabama and Southern Miss, and then when we turn on Higgins Middle Tennessee versus Army game, there probably won't be any fans in the stands, and I think that's gonna be interesting to watch and learn how it affects the games this year, and if it's more high scoring, if it's more low scoring, if, there's a different energy in the stadium with no fans. So it's all things I think we should watch out for in week one. And then when the Power Five guys get into action on the 12th, maybe then we hop in.
I would like to specify, you said probably there won't be fans at the Middle Tennessee versus Army game. There definitely won't be fans at the Army game because that's in New York, and Governor Cuomo said there will be no fans at college sports in New York. So there will be fans at Southern Alabama or South Alabama versus Southern Miss. Won't be fans at Middle Tennessee versus Army. So it'll be interesting to see where fans will be allowed and what it will be like for these college athletes to be playing a game in front of no fans or in front of a lesser amount of fans. I think that'll be interesting to see what impact that has and whether it's positive or negative in terms of offensive production. I think it could potentially bring some value to some over-unders.
Yeah, it's something I'm going to keep my eye on this weekend and see how it affects all these teams.
Let's jump into the NFL now because there are a lot of people this weekend that probably will be having their fantasy football drafts. And there was a big question mark going on when the Jacksonville Jaguars waived Leonard Fournette on where's he going to go? Should you still draft him? Where should you draft him if you want to draft him? Well, he signed on Wednesday a 1 year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady does it again. People love to play with this guy. Now he has Shady McCoy and Leonard Fournette in his backfield. I am starting to feel reservedly scared of what this Tampa Bay team can do.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Leonard Fournette's the best back in their backfield. Currently, they have like seven
Still,
backs. They got Ronald Jones, who they drafted, Shady McGoy, who they signed in free agency, Dari Agumbowale. I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but he was kind of in that what I would call the James White, Danny Woodhead role for them last year, where he kind of was the screen guy out of the backfield for them. And then they spent a third round pick on Keyshawn Vaughn this draft. So this is a crowded backfield, Higgins. And again, I expect Leonard Fournette to get the bulk of the carries, but signing 1 week before the season, I don't know. Is the return on investment going to be there in week one, week two? What if Ronald Jones gets off to a hot start with 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns? Are you going to bench that guy?
well, that's an interesting name to mention because if you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers depth chart, Ronald Jones is the number one back in that backfield right now with Leonard Fournette at 2 and then LaShawn McCoy at 3, followed by Keyshawn Vaughn. I think Leonard Fournette will probably end up taking that first spot, like what you're saying, but how many weeks will it take for him to be familiar and be comfortable, and for Bruce Arians to be comfortable to give him the bulk of those carries? I think that knocks him down at least 2 rounds in fantasy drafts. If I'm talking about my draft strategy of where I would be placing Fournette, I I'd say he's probably what third, fourth round pick, and then now he's probably a fifth or so.
Uh, I think you're a little off on that. I think he'll probably go in the second round in most drafts for fantasy this year.
Well, looks like I'm not getting Leonard Fournette then.
No, that's okay. Hey,
That's okay.
that's your price on Fournette, and you should have that price. If Leonard Fournette's there in the third round, I'll probably take a flyer on him because by week five, I think he'll be the guy. But the first month of the season, it'll be interesting to watch, especially week one and two. Week one and two, I don't know if he's getting the bulk of the carries, but as he continues to get more time around the guys in the playbook, he's certainly the most talented back in their backfield.
I think it'll also be very interesting to see how similar Tom Brady and Bruce Arians are to Brady in New England. Brady's backfield in New England was very multifaceted. It was a lot of different names, and they split up their carries a lot. And in fantasy, that hurt those players.
Yeah.
Will that run true in Tampa Bay? There's a big question mark there for me, which kind of I think that might be why I am valuing Leonard Fournette a little bit lower like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, no one has made names out of Danny Woodhead and James White and
Rex
Dion
Burkhead.
Lewis like Tom Brady has. So that was going to be, again, I'm getting myself in trouble here, but that was going to be Dare's role here. And he just might be out of it. It might be Keyshawn Vaughn's role. It could be Shady. Shady's got decent hands. So it'll be interesting to watch. And I think you're right, Higgins. I think it will be a rotation.
Speaking of that Bucks Patriots similarities, the Patriots they had some news as well, cutting Mohamed Sanu, who they just traded for last year. What receiving core could use Sanu's contributions, and what quarterback could be willing to give up a few passes?
Yeah, crazy that New England gave up a second round pick for this guy not even a year ago and just flat out waived him.
It's not like them at all.
Yeah, very, very interesting. A lot of teams could use Sanu, but his best production last year came in the slot, so it would probably be looking for a team looking for someone to play in that slot role. Um, Historically speaking, the Jets just like signing anyone New England cuts, so I guess the Jets might be in play. He's also from New Jersey, so maybe a little double bonus there, and plus Rashad Perryman's knee injury seems worse than expected, so I think the Jets might be a team to look out for here. I could see the Rams potentially getting in on it with Brandon Cooks leaving this offseason. Maybe they feel he's better than rookie Van Jefferson and Reynolds. I'm drawing a blank on Reynolds. For Josh Reynolds, maybe is his name. But anyway, he could be the third wide out there, and he could probably play over the middle there, and you could have Cup and Woods on the outside.
I could see maybe the Houston Texans. I mean, got to fill DeAndre Hopkins' role with more than just a couple of players. That guy had a huge contributions for them, so they could probably use some receiver help. Tampa Bay, it's a familiar face for Tom Brady. I mean, you got Gronk for him. Maybe throw that in. I mean, they already have a very well-suited wide receiver core. They don't need Mohamed Sanu, but if Tom Brady wants him and they could sign him, Tom Brady might very well get him. It'll be interesting to see. I'd be very reserved on signing Sanu, though, until his free agency time is over and he finds a way to a team. So if you have an earlier draft, that might be a name that falls off of draft boards, and then you might be able to pick up a quality free agent.
Yeah, we'll see. His production's definitely dropped a little bit, but obviously, a talented wide receiver with really good hands. And then in terms of keeping the running back theme going here, Higgins, Joe Mixon got paid. Alvin Kamara is trying to get paid. He had headaches earlier in the week and wasn't in camp and doing all this stuff. And then he showed up on Wednesday, and I don't know. I don't know if I could take him at the fourth overall pick where he's been going in most fantasy drafts. There's just a little bit too much up in the air over there for me.
Well, I don't know if you're a fan of the TV show Ballers, but this storyline was actually in the most recent season of Ballers with his contract year coming up. And does he stay with the Saints? Do the Saints try to find value by trading him before his contract is up? And if I remember correctly, he becomes a Chief sometime during the season. So does Patrick Mahomes get Alvin Kamara? I mean, that would be a dangerous combination right there. We've seen Alvin Kamara's ability out of the backfield for Drew Brees. You can only imagine what that can be like for the no-look Mahomes pass.
Of course, Ballers had him going to the Super Bowl champs. like nothing ever goes wrong in Ballers. Nothing ever goes wrong in Entourage. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Entourage. Greatest show. Ari Gold's my hero, but was there ever a bad day on Entourage?
I think actually no. I just looked it up. I was wrong. I was thinking of the Chiefs because that's where Dwayne the Rock Johnson's character ends up becoming the owner. but Kamara was actually talking about going to the Rams in that show. So interesting with Todd Gurley now being gone. Maybe there's room at the top of that depth chart for him. I don't know if there's space or whatever, but Alvin Kamara is a big enough and a young enough name that if he gets re-signed by the Saints, it'd probably be a big long-term contract. It'll be maybe a trendsetter for the next running back like Saquon Barkley or one of the young guys to get signed like Christian McCaffrey. Or if he gets traded, I'd be interested to see what that haul is in return.
Yeah, I mean, people have been reporting he's not looking for the McCaffrey deal. I don't think he could get the McCaffrey deal because Christian McCaffrey was absolutely on another planet last year. But this is a dude that is a difference maker and he's a game changer and he deserves to get paid. So someone's going to give him a good amount of money. I hope it's New Orleans and I hope that offense keeps growing together. But we shall see. I just don't know if I could take him at 4 overall. Like maybe at the end of the first round, you could take a flyer on a guy like this because he is so talented. But at 4, you might just have to take a known commodity there. 4 or 5, it might be. You might just have to pass on Kamara for right now.
I agree. I actually have the number 4 pick in one of my drafts, and maybe I'll have to part with Kamara. I've had him the past few seasons, so maybe I may have to buck that trend. Last team name I'm going to throw out for Kamara besides the Saints. Sure, Mark Ingram is pleading his case in Baltimore to get Kamara there. I mean, those two were a dynamic duo in New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you're gonna get this guy, you have to have available money. So
Hmm.
that really like leaves the Washington Redskins, or excuse
The
me, the
Washington
Washington
football
football
team,
team
who
as
just
the
announced their starter, by the way, is Dwayne Haskins, not Alex
yeah,
Smith.
they're like the only team with money left. So maybe them. Like that's about it. Otherwise, you got to give up or waive someone, or you got to figure out how to restructure your contracts to get the cap to fit. So it's going to be tough at this point to trade him, in my opinion. But I think they'll work something out. I think both sides realize. I mean, from Kamara's standpoint, he gets to play with a Hall of Fame quarterback, arguably the best wide receiver in the league. And he'll never see an 8-man box, so he probably likes it there. And I think the Saints know that they have a guy that can catch it, that can run, that can run it between the tackles, run to the outside. I mean, they have a weapon. So I think they'll figure out how to get something done, but it's just not something I want to touch right now.
Well, I think we've touched on this topic for long enough. Before we get out of here, Brett, the Levy lock and the pick of the pod. My pick of the pod won, so I guess I will go first. I'm going to pick Denver's plus 8.5. I still just think that spread is too high for this game one of a series that is going to have some unknowns with it. I think Denver's going to make it tougher for the Clippers than the Clippers might expect. And maybe they could steal game one like we've seen in a few of these other series. So plus 8.5, I think, is just a lot of points to be given.
Well, what's funny is I always used to joke that I was going to become a Toronto sports fan, and tomorrow is my day as a Toronto sports fan. I got the Blue Jays, I'm at the Raptors, but my Levy lock is going to be the Toronto Blue Jays in Fenway Park, minus 120. Taiwan Walker making his Blue Jays debut. Jonathan VR, another deadline piece playing for the Blue Jays. So I think these guys are going to want to come out and play well for Toronto.
Real quick, do you think you'll have a chance of, or maybe do you think you'll parlay your Toronto picks?
The
Go with a city
Toronto
parlay?
parlay, I don't know. It's pretty funny. As a Mets Jets fan, I've just always said I should become a Toronto sports fan. It can't get any worse. And I think tomorrow's my day. Try it out. See how the Toronto sports scene goes.
Maple Leafs fans might argue with you on the fact that it can get worse, at least for them.
Yeah, I like my Rangers. I don't know if I'll go that far.
Well, make sure to follow us on social media. We might be giving out some more Thursday picks as well, and we will have some other picks on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday before episode 74 comes out. at NBB Pod on Twitter, at Next Best Bet on Instagram, and the Next Best Bet Facebook page. This has been episode 73 of the Next Best Bet. For Brett, I'm Jake. We'll talk to you again after the weekend.